The night the CEO told me to thank Sienna for saving my project, I just nodded. The presentation bore her name, but the code keeping the SEC away was mine. They thought I was the obedient compliance nerd. They missed the clause on page 21, the one that turned me from a pawn into the only person who could bury her. They call it a monitoring system. The SEC calls it evidence. I call it the blade I'm about to use. My name is Claire Rivera. I am 38 years old, and for the past 11 years, my entire professional life has been dedicated to Orion LedgerWorks. I am, or perhaps I was, the senior risk architect. That title sounds impressive, but it means I am the person who lives in the basement of the building, metaphorically speaking. I do not deal in sleek marketing or billion-dollar handshakes. I live in data. I breathe regulatory frameworks. My currency is the fine print on page 42 of a contract that everyone else ignored. I build the systems that keep the high flyers from crashing the entire company. For 11 years, I have been the structural integrity holding up the penthouse party. I was good at it. I was quiet, and they mistook quiet for weak. The quarterly strategy meeting was held in the Olympus Room, all glass and brushed steel overlooking downtown Manhattan. The air was thick with that specific corporate tension, a mix of feigned optimism and raw fear for quarterly numbers. Our CEO, Graham Ellison, stood at the front. He has that curated silver fox look, the expensive suit, the voice that sounds reassuring even when he is cutting your budget by 20%. Today, Graham started, his voice booming, we unveil the future of Orion, the single element that will not only drive growth, but will insulate us completely from the regulatory headaches plaguing our competitors. He clicked the remote. The massive screen lit up. I give you Aegis Trace. My stomach tightened. Aegis Trace. That was my baby. For 3 years, I had built it from scratch. It was not just a program. It was a complex, self-learning framework designed to monitor every transaction in real time, flagging insider trading, layering, and wash trading before a human regulator could even smell it. It was the system poised to save us millions, potentially billions, in SEC fines. Graham beamed. This breakthrough is the result of tireless strategic innovation, and the visionary leading that charge, our own Chief Strategy Officer, Sienna Vale. Sienna rose. She was everything I was not, barely 30, dressed in a sharp, blood-red dress that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. She moved to the front, accepting Graham's proprietary hand on the small of her back. The secret of their relationship was the worst-kept rumor in the office. I sat at the far end of the long mahogany table, the seat reserved for the technical staff, who were supposed to be seen and not heard. Sienna started talking. Her voice was smooth, polished, full of corporate jargon, synergy, proactive architecture, leveraging assets. On the screen, my work flashed by, my data visualizations, my risk control flowcharts, my architectural diagrams, mapping how the AI assessed threats, except they were not mine anymore. In the bottom right corner of every single slide, where my internal watermark should have been, was a sleek new logo, the Sienna Initiative. I felt the blood drain from my face. I had presented these exact modules to Graham and Sienna in closed-door sessions for 6 months. They were my intellectual property, built on my frameworks. Now, they were branded as hers. I watched, mute, as she took credit for the logic gates I had designed at 3 a.m. She claimed the predictive modeling I had spent weekends refining. Then, it happened. Leonard Marsh, a hawk from the board, who actually read the prep materials, raised his hand. Ms. Vale, he said, his voice dry. Impressive. Can you elaborate on slide 27 specifically? How does the Aegis Trace kernel handle heuristic analysis when faced with obfuscated layering across 3 separate dark pools? What is the false positive rate on transactions below the $10,000 reporting threshold? The room went silent. Sienna's polished smile froze. She clicked back. Her eyes scanned the slide, desperately searching for an answer that was not there. She knew the buzzwords, not the architecture. Her gaze flickered, darting across the room until it landed, inevitably, on me. It was a brief, panicked plea for help. I held my breath. This was it. This was the moment she would have to admit she did not know. But Graham stepped in before I could even clear my throat. "Leonard, that is exactly the kind of in-the-weeds thinking we need to move past," Graham said, his tone laced with dismissive charm. He turned his gaze on me, sweeping the whole room into his line of sight. "Rivera," he said, using my last name like a reprimand. "Do not complicate things. We are here to discuss strategy, not technical minutiae." The air crackled. He was not just answering the question. He was putting me in my place. He was telling the board I was the hired help, the mechanic obsessed with bolts while they discussed the destination. A few nervous, sycophantic laughs erupted from Sienna's team. I felt the heat rise in my neck. I saw the eyes, the pity from some of the older engineers who knew damn well whose work that was, and worse, the smug, triumphant smirk from Sienna's faction. It was a public execution, wrapped in professional courtesy. I had been silenced. I just nodded, lowering my gaze to the legal pad in front of me, the humiliation burning like acid. The meeting mercifully ended. People filed out, careful to avoid eye contact with me. I gathered my things, my hands shaking slightly. I needed to get out of that room. I made it to the hallway, the antiseptic white noise of the ventilation system humming, when a low voice spoke beside me. "You should learn to be a team player, Claire." Sienna was standing there, fixing her cufflink. She did not even look at me. "That was quite the presentation," I managed, my voice tight. She finally turned, her eyes cold and assessing. "It was, and it is the presentation that matters. At this level, nobody remembers who wrote the code. They only remember who was brave enough to stand on the stage." It was a clean, sharp stab. She was not just stealing my work. She was telling me I deserved to have it stolen because I lacked her brand of ambition. "Enjoy your success, Sienna," I said, and pushed past her toward Graham's office. His assistant tried to stop me, but I walked right past her. Graham was pouring himself a scotch, even though it was barely 11 a.m. "Graham, we need to talk about Aegis Trace," I said, skipping the pleasantries. He sighed, annoyed at the intrusion. "Claire, not now. We just had a huge win." "That was my work, Graham, not hers. We both know it." "It is the company's work," he corrected, taking a sip. "No," I insisted, my voice shaking but firm. "It is not my original consultant agreement. Before I came on full-time 11 years ago, the IP for the foundational framework of Aegis Trace belongs to me, to Rivera Forensic Systems. We never signed the final IP transfer addendum. I built this on my own architecture." Graham put the glass down. The jovial mask was gone. His eyes went flat. "Legal handled all that," he said dismissively. "Did they? Because I have the original contract. It states the IP remains mine unless explicitly transferred." He walked slowly toward me, stopping just inside my personal space. He was taller, louder, the alpha in the room. "Orion has invested millions in you, Claire," he said, his voice dangerously low. "We took you from a one-woman consultancy and gave you a home. We gave you resources. Do not make yourself an HR problem." An HR problem, the corporate death sentence, the label they slap on you right before they manufacture a reason to fire you. "I am just stating what my contract says," I whispered. "And I am stating what the reality is," he countered. "Sienna is the face of this. The board loves her. The initiative is funded. You will play your part, or you will not have a part to play. Are we clear?" I looked at him, the man I had respected, the man I had worked weekends for, the man who had just watched his mistress steal my career and then threatened me for pointing it out. I did not say another word. I just turned and walked out of his office. I walked back to my desk in the open-plan pit with the rest of the risk team. My monitor was still active, displaying a critical bug report for the Aegis Trace data stream. My job, my duty, was to fix it. I was the good soldier, the reliable one. I sat down. The bug alert blinked red. They thought I was just the mechanic. They thought I only understood code. But I had told Graham the truth. I live by data, and I live by clauses. For the first time in 11 years, I ignored the blinking red alert. I minimized the debugging console. My hand moved to the mouse, and I navigated my drive. I did not open the code repository. I opened a folder I had not looked at in a decade. A folder labeled simply, Contracts. I did not sleep. I do not think I even blinked on the subway ride home. My apartment, usually a sanctuary of quiet logic, felt like a pressurized cabin. The silence was deafening, filled only with the echo of Graham's voice. Don't make yourself an HR problem. I dropped my keys, bypassed the kitchen, and went straight to the old metal filing cabinet in my spare room. It screeched in protest as I pulled the bottom drawer open. Inside, under old tax returns, was a heavy manila folder labeled Rivera Forensic Systems, LLC. My company, my brave attempt at independence before I had traded it for the perceived security of Orion. I spread the documents across my small dining table, the streetlight outside casting long shadows. First, the original consultancy agreement, signed 11 years ago. It was thin, precise, drafted by a hungry lawyer I could barely afford at the time. Second, the full-time employment offer I signed 6 months later. It was a thick, glossy packet, full of corporate branding, benefits enrollment forms, and stock option grants. I read the employment offer first. It was standard. It contained all the usual clauses: non-disclosure, non-compete. It talked about salary, bonuses, and vacation days. It superseded any previous financial arrangements. Then I picked up the original consultant agreement. My hands were steady, but my pulse was high. I knew what I was looking for. I had built my entire career on the principle that no one ever reads the appendices. I skipped past the scope of work, past the payment schedules. I went straight to the back, near the signature page. Section 14, Intellectual Property. My eyes found the paragraph. Clause 14b. In the event of termination of this consultancy or conversion to a new employment structure, I read, my voice a whisper in the quiet room, all proprietary frameworks, algorithms, and analytical models, hereinafter referred to as the Aegis Trace architecture, and all customized modules derived therefrom, shall remain the sole and exclusive intellectual property of Rivera Forensic Systems, LLC, unless and until a separate specific intellectual property transfer addendum is fully executed by authorized representatives of both parties. My heart stopped. A separate specific addendum, I knew, with the kind of bone-deep certainty that defines my life, that no such addendum had ever been signed. I ran to my personal laptop, the one Orion had never touched. I powered it on, my fingers flying, and pulled up my archived personal email database from 11 years ago. I searched the correspondence with Orion's legal and human resources departments. I found the thread. Claire, we are so excited to bring you on board full-time, the HR head had written. Graham is thrilled. Please find the standard employment packet attached. Just sign and return, and we can get you integrated into the system by the 1st of the month. I saw my reply. Thank you. Looking forward to it. Is there any other paperwork? What about the IP assignment for the Aegis Trace framework? The response from legal. 2 days later. Welcome aboard. Claire, the standard employment agreement covers all work for hire going forward. Just sign the packet. We're moving fast on this. They had been sloppy. In their rush to integrate me and lock me down as an employee, they had focused on the future work. They had answered my question without answering it. They had relied on their standard template and never followed up with the specific, separate addendum required by the contract I had already signed. For 11 years, Orion LedgerWorks had been paying me a salary to build out and perfect a system that, according to the only document that mattered, still belonged to Rivera Forensic Systems, LLC. They did not own Aegis Trace, they were just borrowing it, and Graham had just threatened the owner. The humiliation from the boardroom began to recede, replaced by a cold, sharp focus. Why? Why go to such lengths to steal the credit? Was it just Sienna's vanity? Graham's desire to promote his lover? No, That was sloppy. Graham was arrogant. But he was not usually sloppy about fundamentals. There had to be something else. I sat back at my work-issued laptop, the one I had brought home out of habit. I connected to the secure Orion VPN. As the architect, I had root access to Aegis Trace, not the glossy user interface Sienna showed the board, but the raw command line backend, the place where the data lives. I opened the system's core configuration logs. Aegis Trace was designed to be an immutable vault. Every query, every adjustment, every login, it was all recorded, time-stamped, and cryptographically sealed. You could not erase a footprint. It was the entire point. I filtered the administrative access logs for the past 6 months. My user ID was there. The IDs of my 2 junior risk engineers were there. Standard patches, performance tuning, all normal. And then, I saw it. A new administrative account, created 8 weeks ago. User ID S. Veil Strategy. My breath hitched. The Chief Strategy Officer should not have admin credentials. She should not be inside the engine room. She was supposed to be a passenger. Looking at the dashboards I built for her, granting her this access was like giving the airline's head of marketing a key to the cockpit. It was a catastrophic breach of protocol. I tracked the activity on her account. The entries were sporadic, but the timing was specific. 1:13 a.m., 2:40 a.m., 3:05 a.m. The dead of night. When the U.S. markets were closed and my team was asleep, Sienna had been busy. She had not been adding anything. She had been editing. I pulled up the alert threshold tables. Aegis Trace works by flagging suspicious patterns. My team and I had spent years tuning these thresholds to be razor-sharp, calibrated to the latest SEC enforcement actions. Sienna's account had accessed Alert Profile 81B. This profile was designed specifically to catch sophisticated insider trading patterns related to options contracts placed just before major, non-public announcements. She had lowered the sensitivity. She had decreased the look-back period from 30 days to 7. She had increased the minimum transaction value required to trigger a flag by 200%. She was not just making it look good, she was deliberately, surgically blinding the system. I felt sick. I cross-referenced the dates of her overrides with Orion's recent performance. Graham had been ecstatic in the last all-hands, praising a new, massive revenue stream from a group of VIP clients brought in by Sienna's strategic team. I pulled the transaction data for those specific VIP clients. I ran their activity through the original Alert Profile 81B before Sienna's modifications. The screen lit up like a Christmas tree. Red flags, dozens of them, all perfectly timed trades, netting millions, executed just days before Orion announced quarterly earnings. A new partnership, a major acquisition, all transactions that Aegis Trace should have caught and frozen, all transactions that were now invisible. Sienna had not just stolen the credit for my work. She was using my system as a cover. She was actively facilitating insider trading for her star clients to fabricate strategic growth, and she was presenting the neutered system to the board as a triumph of compliance. She was handing Graham wins, and in exchange, he was handing her my career on a platter. And both of them were exposing the entire company to the kind of SEC penalties that do not just end careers, but end firms. I leaned back, the chill in the room seeping into my bones. My internal conflict evaporated. This was no longer a choice between my pride and my job. This was not about a bonus. This was about my name, my work, my integrity. They had built their criminal enterprise inside the fortress I had constructed, and they were using my name as the cornerstone. I looked at the highlighted copy of Clause 14B lying on my table. They thought I was a pawn they could sacrifice. They forgot I was the one who designed the board. I picked up a pen and a bright yellow sticky note. I wrote 6 words, pressing the pen down so hard it nearly tore the paper. I stuck it to the front page of the contract. If they steal my credit, I take back the system. My eyes were dry. The hurt was gone, burned away by a cold, calculating resolve. The game was no longer about code. It was about the contract. I slept for exactly 2 hours. When I woke at 4 a.m., The anger and humiliation had cooled, settling into something hard and clear. The plan was set. I showered, dressed in my best suit, not a power suit, but the dark gray, perfectly tailored wool suit that signaled I was not there to negotiate. I was there to conclude. I bypassed my work laptop, taking only my building access badge and a single crisp white envelope. I arrived at 8:15 a.m., before the morning rush, before the hum of the trading floor began. Graham's assistant was not at her desk yet. His door was open. He was on the phone, laughing about a golf game, his feet up on his pristine desk. I stood in the doorway, silent, until he noticed me. His smile faded, replaced by mild annoyance. "Claire, you are in early. Good," he said, swinging his feet to the floor. "We need to address that alert latency from yesterday before the board." "I resign," I said. My voice was not loud, but it cut through the room. I stepped forward and placed the white envelope on the gleaming surface of his desk, next to his family photo. He blinked. The abruptness caught him off guard. "What?" "I resign," I repeated, my voice perfectly level. "My termination is effective immediately." He stood up, the baffled annoyance shifting to condescending paternalism. The CEO voice kicked in. "Claire, let's not be dramatic. Yesterday was tense. I get it. You felt blindsided, but this is an overreaction." "I am not being dramatic. Graham, I am being precise." He picked up the envelope, annoyed, as if I were a petulant child throwing a tantrum. He ripped it open and pulled out the single sheet of heavy bond paper. He read the one-sentence reason I had typed below my name. Reason for separation. "I no longer have confidence in the ethical direction of the executive leadership." His face hardened. The mask was back. "That is a very serious, very foolish allegation to put in writing. Claire, you are walking a dangerous line." "It is the truth," I said. "I just need you to sign the termination paperwork for human resources. I will wait." "You are throwing away 11 years. His voice was rising. He was genuinely baffled. He could not compute an action that was not based on leverage or money. "You have a massive future here. We are about to go public on the back of Aegis Trace." "Aegis Trace," I said, "is the entire problem." He stared at me, finally seeing the absolute, cold resolve in my eyes. He realized I was not there to negotiate for a raise or a new title. I was a loose end, an HR problem, as he had so accurately predicted, and the fastest, cleanest way to solve an HR problem is to sign the paper and show them the door. "Fine," he snapped. He grabbed a pen, scribbled his name on the internal HR separation form he kept on his desk, and practically threw it at me. "Fine, you are done. You will be escorted out. Your building access and network credentials will be revoked by 9 a.m. Do not talk to anyone on your way out." He did not realize he was not revoking my access. He was activating it. I took the signed form. "Thank you, Graham. Goodbye." Security met me at my desk. I did not take anything. Not the framed photo of my old team after we passed the last regulatory audit. Not the silly stress ball shaped like a bull. I just handed over my access badge. I was walked to the elevator. The walk of shame that everyone in the office pretends not to see. As the elevator doors closed, I saw Sienna Vale standing by the coffee machine, a small, victorious smile on her face. I was home by 9:30 a.m. I made coffee. I paid my utility bills online. At Orion Ledgerworks, at exactly 9:28 a.m., an HR administrator named Brenda, whom I had never met, processed my termination. She typed my employee ID 774B into the central directory and clicked a button. Terminate. The action triggered a cascade of automated scripts. My email account was queued for deletion. My network access was severed. And most importantly, my employee ID was flagged as inactive. Deep in the primary data center, the Aegis Trace license server performed its hourly handshake with the Orion directory. It was a security protocol I had designed myself. Back when I was a consultant, the system was built on my LLC's license. That license was, in turn, Authorized for use by an active employee C. Rivera. At 10 a.m., the handshake failed. The server checked again. Employee C. Rivera inactive. The license protocol I had written 11 years ago, the one that protected my IP before I was an employee, executed its primary command. It was not a bug. It was a feature. Authentication failed. Reverting to base ownership license. The system immediately severed its connection to the Orion domain key. It purged the temporary administrative credentials Sienna and Graham had granted themselves. Then, it reached out to a small, secure cloud server I paid $40 a month for. The registered home of Rivera Forensic Systems, LLC. It found its license key, the system status, visible only to a root-level user me, changed. Ownership reverted to Rivera Forensic Systems, LLC, enterprise access restricted to read-only mode. In the office, nothing happened. Not at first. The markets were open. Data was flowing. The system looked fine because the read-only mode still allowed existing data to be displayed. The dashboards were still showing the numbers from 9:29 a.m. The day ticked by. I read a book on Roman history. At 4 p.m., the market closed. This was 0 hour. This was when Aegis Trace performed its most critical function, the end-of-day batch analysis and the generation of compliance reports for Orion's partner banks and clearinghouses. I knew, because I had designed it, that at 4:01 p.m. my old team would be in trouble. At Orion, my former junior engineer, Ben, probably hit run on the batch report. He would have seen the error message. Write access denied. He would have tried again. Write access denied. He would have checked the dashboards. The data stream was frozen. No new trades had been logged since 9:29 a.m. The entire day's market activity, billions of dollars in transactions, had gone unmonitored. Panic. Ben would have called his manager. The manager would have called the head of IT. I pictured Sienna, standing in the glass-walled IT war room. "What do you mean? It is frozen," she would be shouting. "Reboot the servers. Reboot all of them, now." The IT director, a man I respected, would have already tried that. "It is not the server. Ms. Vale, we have rebooted. The core license is gone. It is rejecting our credentials." "That is impossible. This is our system." "It appears," the IT director would say, enjoying this moment just a little, "that it is not. The license has reverted to an external owner, Rivera Forensic Systems." Silence. Sienna would not understand. She would just look at Graham, her expression demanding he fix this. At home, my personal laptop chimed. A new email. It was an automated alert from Aegis Trace's core. Subject license state change detected. Action required. Body system has reverted to external ownership. Rivera Forensic Systems, LLC. Write access for all Orion LedgerWorks domains is suspended. Administrative approval from the license owner is required to restore write access. I read the email. I sipped my coffee, which had gone cold. I did nothing. The system was working exactly as designed. Back at Orion, the panic would have reached the legal department. I imagined Dana Whitaker, the chief legal officer, pale, staring at a copy of my original consulting agreement, the one they had just pulled from the archives. "He is right," she would be telling Graham. "They never executed the transfer addendum. She never signed over the IP. So what?" Graham would bark. "We paid for it." "That is not how it works, Graham," Dana would say, the fear dawning. "If this contract is valid, then she owns Aegis Trace, and if she owns it, all those adjustments Sienna made," she would look at Sienna. "That was not just a breach of protocol. That was unauthorized access and modification of proprietary software. That is copyright infringement. That is a federal crime." The room would go cold. The problem was no longer that the system was down. The problem was that they had been caught. My phone lit up on the table. The screen was bright and clear. Graham Ellison. I watched it vibrate. Once, twice, 3 times. The man who had threatened me, who had told me not to be an HR problem, was calling. It clicked to voicemail. A moment later, the notification popped up. New voicemail. I pressed play. The speaker crackled to life. Claire, Graham's voice. All the arrogance was gone, replaced by a thin, brittle attempt at calm. Claire, hi. Listen, I think there has been a significant misunderstanding, a systems issue. Look, we are all adults here. Why don't you give me a call back? We can sit down, negotiate. We can sort this all out. Just call me back. I listened to the message again. The desperation was hidden deep, but I could hear it. I knew his voice. I deleted the voicemail. I turned my phone onto silent. I let the panic on their end ripen. Just a little while longer. I let them panic for 72 hours, 3 full business days. For 3 days, Orion Ledgerworks, a multi-billion-dollar fintech firm, was operating blind. Without Aegis Trace, they could not generate a single compliance report. They could not satisfy their banking partners. They could not monitor their trades. Every minute they operated, they were non-compliant, exposed to catastrophic SEC violations that dwarfed whatever Sienna was hiding. Graham's calls became frantic, then angry, then pleading. He was followed by calls from Dana Whitaker, the chief legal officer, whose voice was strained with professional terror. I did not answer. I let my own lawyer, the same one who had drafted Clause 14b 11 years ago, handle the inbound communication. The negotiation was, I am told, very short, the board of directors. Upon learning from Dana that their entire compliance infrastructure was owned by a single disgruntled ex-employee they had just publicly humiliated, did not appreciate the nuance of Graham's HR problem. They were staring at a complete shutdown of the firm. They had 2 choices: sue me to try and seize the IP, a legal battle that would take years and force them to admit their criminal malfeasance in open court, or pay me. They paid. My lawyer presented a new 4-month consulting agreement for Rivera Forensic Systems, LLC. The terms were non-negotiable, a fee equivalent to triple my old annual salary, payable in advance, full, exclusive, and autonomous administrative control over the Aegis Trace architecture, and a clause stating that my firm was indemnified from any pre-existing data irregularities, the legal armor I needed before I waded into the sewer. The board forced Graham to sign it. On Monday morning, exactly 1 week after my public humiliation, I walked back into the Orion Ledgerworks lobby. I was not escorted. I did not use a visitor pass. I presented my new credentials. The security guard, the same one who had watched me get walked out, handed me my new badge with a look of stunned respect. It did not say Claire Rivera, employee. It said Claire Rivera, external compliance architect. I badged through the turnstiles. As I stepped onto the open-plan floor, the effect was immediate. The chatter, the typing, the low hum of business, it all stopped. It was as if someone had hit a mute button. My old team stared, their mouths open. I was not one of them anymore. I was not the quiet nerd in the corner. I was the ghost who had come back to haunt the machine, and now I owned the machine. I walked straight to the Olympus room, where the crisis meeting was being held. The entire executive team was there. Graham, looking sleepless and gray, Dana Whitaker, looking like she was about to be physically ill, and Sienna Vale, sitting at the head of the table, attempting to look composed. I walked in, and the conversation died. Claire, Graham started, his voice rough. Thank you for coming in. I am here as specified in the contract, I said, my voice cold and flat. I remained standing. Let's begin. Sienna stood up, forcing a bright, collaborative smile. It was a grotesque performance. She walked toward me, her hand extended. Claire, I am so glad we got this sorted out, she gushed, as if we were all old friends who had cleared up a simple misunderstanding. It is wonderful to have you back to help the team get this system back on its feet. I looked at her extended hand. I did not take it. I am not here to help the team. Ms. Vale, I said. I am here to conduct a full diagnostic and structural audit to determine the cause of the system failure. The smile on her face did not falter, but her eyes went hard. I saw the muscles in her jaw bunch. She knew, in that moment, that the power dynamic had not just shifted, it had inverted. Of course, she said, slowly retracting her hand. Whatever you need. What I need, I said, turning to the room, is for everyone to understand the new protocol. Aegis Trace is a proprietary system. As the owner, I will be the only person with root access. The system has been compromised. I will be conducting a phased restoration, module by module, to ensure data integrity has not been fatally corrupted. Graham shifted. Phased Claire. We need it online now. We are bleeding. You have been operating without compliance monitoring for 3 days, I countered, looking him dead in the eye. If I bring it all online at once, and the data from last week is corrupt, you will be poisoning your entire historical record. My phased audit is the only way to protect the firm from further liability, unless you would prefer I just hand the keys back over to the people who broke it. Dana Whitaker spoke up, her voice shaky. No. Ms. Rivera's approach is correct. An audit is the only legally defensible path forward. You have our full cooperation. Claire. Good, I said. I did not sit down. I will require a secure office, not on this floor. And I will need the full, unredacted internal server logs from IT for the last 90 days. Sienna's composure finally cracked. The server logs. That is an IT function. It has nothing to do with the Aegis Trace license. It has everything to do with it, I said. I am investigating a system failure. I need to know who was in the cockpit when it crashed. I will expect those logs by noon. I turned and walked out, leaving the silence of the boardroom behind me. By 11 a.m., I was set up in a locked office on the 30th floor, far from the risk team, far from Sienna, and by noon, as requested, a terrified junior IT tech had delivered an encrypted hard drive containing the server logs. I locked the door, I connected the drive, and I went to work. My phased restoration was a lie. I had already restored the system's write access from my laptop at home, placing it in a sandbox mode. The system was fine. It was the users I was auditing. I did not need to look at the Aegis Trace logs. I had already seen those. I needed to see what they were hiding. I went straight to the activity logs for User S, Veil Strategy. I already knew she had lowered the alert thresholds. Now I wanted to know why. Aegis Trace logs all suspicious trades, but it also logs the reasons for overrides. If an admin deems an alert a false positive, they have to categorize it. Sienna had overridden hundreds of alerts. All of them were categorized as system test/noise. I pulled the raw transaction data for those test trades. They were not tests. They were real, executed trades, all originating from a new high-volume client fund, Vantage Meridian, LLC. The name sounded innocuous. I ran a search. Vantage Meridian was a shell corporation registered in Delaware 6 months ago. I could not see the owners, but I could see who their account manager at Orion was, a new hire in Sienna's strategic department. I dug deeper into the trades. They were not just insider options. This was bigger. I saw the patterns of wash trading, a single entity trading with itself across different brokers to create the illusion of high volume, artificially inflating a stock's price. I saw layering placing and then immediately canceling, thousands of small orders to create fake market depth, luring in algorithmic traders. These were not sophisticated loopholes. This was blunt force, unambiguous market manipulation. This was the kind of crime that did not just get you fined. It got you prison time, and all of it, every single illegal trade, had been flagged by my system, and every single flag had been manually overridden by Sienna, marked as noise. My eyes went to the timestamps: 1:17 a.m., 2:03 a.m., 3:32 a.m. I opened the company email archive. I ran a search for emails sent by Sienna Vale to Graham Ellison between 1 and 4 a.m. on those exact dates. I found them. Date August 14th, 3:34 a.m. from S. Vale to G. Ellison. Subject growth. Body. That new VIP fund is performing beyond expectations. Another massive inflow. We are going to blow the quarterly numbers out of the water. See, I told you my strategy would pay off. Date September 5th, 2:05 a.m. From S. Vale to G. Ellison. Subject re-alert, body. Graham, the system is fine. Stop listening to the tech drones. I handled the alerts. They were just noise, bogging down a key client. It is handled. Date September 28th, 1:19 a.m. From S. Vale to G. Ellison. Subject, success. Body. Vantage is a home run. They are our new golden goose. The revenue is real. Stop worrying about the risk. That is what I'm here for, to manage it. She was not just stealing my credit. She was using my system, my beautiful, intricate machine of logic and compliance, as a high-tech garbage disposal for her crimes. She was using it to hide the evidence of a massive market manipulation scheme, feeding fake growth numbers to Graham so he would praise her, promote her, and give her more power. The full picture hit me with the force of a physical blow. She was going to ride this wave of fake revenue all the way to the IPO, cash out with millions, and leave the company, its shareholders, and me holding the bag when the SEC finally pieced it all together. I looked at the final log entry on my screen. September 28th, 1:17 a.m., Alert 945D wash trade pattern, override by S. Vale strategy, my hand, which had been perfectly steady all day, began to shake, not with fear, with rage. She had not just stolen my work, she had defiled it. I slotted a blank, encrypted USB drive into the port. I was not there to fix the system. I was there to gather the evidence. I began a secure, byte-for-byte copy of the entire log file. This was not about my job anymore. This was about my name. And I was going to take it back, even if I had to burn Orion to the ground to do it. I spent the next 12 hours in that locked office, collating the data. I built a separate, password-protected report that cross-referenced Sienna's admin overrides with the email timestamps, the Vantage Meridian trades, and the corresponding growth figures she had presented to the board. The report was not an accusation. It was a simple, irrefutable timeline of facts. It was a digital guillotine. I could have gone straight to my lawyer. I could have gone straight to the SEC. But there was one person left at Orion who I believed still operated on a different frequency. Dana Whitaker, the chief legal officer. Dana was pragmatic, a corporate loyalist, but she was also a damn good lawyer who respected the rule of law. She was the one who had, in her own way, tried to warn Graham about the IP contract. She was the only one who had not treated me with either pity or contempt. I scheduled a meeting with her for the following morning, using her private calendar, with the subject line, Urgent Aegis Trace Audit Finding, Attorney-Client Privilege. I entered her office and closed the door. She looked wary, tired. "Claire," she said, motioning for me to sit. "I assume you have the system back online." "The system is stable," I said. "But I found the reason it failed, and it was not a technical error." I placed my personal laptop on her desk and turned it to face her. I opened the report. "As the external architect, I've been auditing the admin logs. I need your legal opinion on this." I did not editorialize. I just showed her the screen, the timestamps, the S. Vale strategy overrides, the wash trade alerts being dismissed as noise. I watched her face. Dana was a professional. She did not gasp. Her expression did not change, but the color drained from her skin, leaving a pale, papery sheen. She scrolled, her eyes moving faster and faster. When she got to the email cross-references, her hand, the one on the mouse, froze. "How many?" she whispered. "Hundreds of overrides, billions in unmonitored, suspicious trades, concentrated in one client fund, all personally cleared by the chief strategy officer in the middle of the night." Dana leaned back and closed her eyes for a full 10 seconds. When she opened them, the weariness was gone, replaced by a cold, sharp fear. "It is a pattern," she said, almost to herself. "The SEC does not care about a single mistake. They hunt patterns. This is not a glitch. This is a scheme." "Yes," I said. "This," she continued. her voice still low. Will not just bring fines, this will bring criminal charges. This could trigger an emergency halt on our stock. It could destroy the firm. Graham. Does he know the scale of this? He knows the results, I said, pointing to the email from Sienna. I handled the alerts. They were just noise. He was, at minimum, willfully blind. Dana stood up and began pacing her office. Okay, we have options. Always options. She was talking to herself now. Option 1, we bury this. We hire you to scrub the logs, fix the system, and we fire Sienna for cause, citing procedural violations. We contain it. No, I said. She stopped. No. The logs are immutable. I designed them that way. There is no scrubbing. There is only deleting the entire archive, which is an act of spoliation that will send you to jail when it's discovered. And it will be discovered. Right, she nodded, respecting the hard truth. Right. Okay. Option 2. We go the soft route. We commission a full, independent audit, separate from you. We discover these irregularities. We self-report to the SEC. Blame Sienna, fire her, fire Graham, and beg for leniency. It saves the company but guts the leadership. That is a possibility, I said. And option 3, she sighed, is that we are already too late, and the SEC is already building a case, in which case we need to decide what side of the table we are on when they walk in. She looked at me, her eyes pleading. Claire, I need to try the soft path first. I have to protect the company. We need a meeting, me, you, Graham, and Sienna, a private, closed-door session, no minutes. We lay this on the table and find out what he knew. Will you do that? As our consultant, I recognized her position. She was trapped between her duty to the CEO and her duty to the law. She was trying to find a third way out. I will present my findings. Yes, I said. The meeting was set for that afternoon. Same boardroom. But this time, the tension was suffocating. It was just the 4 of us. Dana, what is this? Graham started, annoyed. I have a bank to run. Claire, is the system fixed or not? That is what we are here to discuss. Graham, Dana said, her voice tight. Claire has completed her audit. Good, Sienna said, smiling. So we can finally get back to work. Claire, Dana prompted. Please. I did not use the main screen. I used my laptop again. My audit found the system failure was not a failure. It was a series of deliberate manual interventions. I detailed the overrides. I detailed the timing. I detailed the client fund. Graham's face went from annoyed to confused to ashen. He was not a fool. He was following the implications. But before he could speak, Sienna cut in, laughing. It was a sharp, brittle sound. Is that what this is about? She said, all airy dismissal. My God. Claire, you really are just a tech drone. Are not you? She turned to Graham. Graham, this is what I was handling. We were running test scenarios, aggressive strategies for the new fund. Of course we had to adjust the alert thresholds. The system was flagging everything. It was just noise. Claire is showing you logs from a test that got mixed with the production data. These were not tests, Sienna, I said calmly. They were live, executed trades. The money was real. It was a logging error, she snapped, her voice rising. A bug in your system that miscategorized test data. That is what this is, a bug. And now, she said, her voice turning sympathetic, Claire is trying to cover for her system's flaws by blaming the strategy team. Graham looked from her to me, desperate to believe Sienna's version. So, the solution is simple, Sienna continued, pressing her advantage. She looked at me, her eyes glittering. Claire, as our highly paid consultant, you need to go back in and fix the logging error. You need to adjust those old test logs so they match the reality of the situation, so they do not create this confusing narrative. I said nothing. She was not just asking me to lie. She was asking me to actively falsify data, to commit a felony, right in front of the chief legal officer. Graham was silent, watching me, waiting. "I think," Sienna said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial purr, "that this has all been a terrible misunderstanding. This new consultant contract, it is very generous, but it is not very long-term. Is it?" It was a threat, clean and simple. "Cooperate, or you are out again." "But it does not have to be that way," she added, leaning forward. "You are clearly brilliant, Claire, just focused on the wrong things. I know people at several other funds, top-tier places. They would pay a lot for someone with your skills, especially if you came with a glowing recommendation from Orion." She smiled. "You just need to help us clean this up, fix the logs, put this whole ugly bug behind us. We all win." It was a bribe, a threat and a bribe, all in one breath. I looked at Dana. Her face was granite. She was not trapped anymore. She was furious. Sienna had just made her an accessory to a cover-up. Dana was staring at Sienna, but I could see the internal calculation. She was no longer trying to save Graham. She was figuring out how to save herself. "I will take your recommendation under advisement," I said to Sienna. I closed my laptop. "My audit stands. The logs are accurate." I stood up and left the room. That night, I was at home, staring at the encrypted drive, wondering what my next move was. My phone buzzed. A new email. But not to my work or personal account. It was to the old, obscure admin email for Rivera Forensic Systems, LLC. The sender was anonymous. No reply proton. Me. The subject line was just a case number. The body of the email contained a single link to a secure file-sharing site. And one sentence. "They have been lying to you." They knew. My hands were shaking as I clicked the link. It was a single, scanned PDF. It was an official subpoena from the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission, Division of Enforcement. It was addressed to Orion Ledgerworks, Etienne Legal Department. It was a formal demand for all communications, trade data, and system logs related to Vantage Meridian, LLC. I looked at the date stamp in the top corner. It was not from today. It was not from yesterday. It had been received by Orion 2 weeks ago, before I was fired, before the board meeting, before I had even confronted Graham. They knew. The SEC was already investigating. The entire charade, Graham's threats, Sienna's presentation, the panicked rehiring of me, it was all a desperate attempt to gain control of the evidence before they had to turn it over. They were not trying to hide it from the SEC. They were trying to change it. I scrolled to the last page of the email file, looking at the raw header data. Where had this come from? The IP address was obfuscated, routed through a dozen nodes. But the originating internal mail server ID was visible. Just for a split second, in the metadata. I recognized it. It was not from the executive floor. It was not from IT. It was from the legal department. Someone on Dana's team. Someone was helping me. I looked at the subpoena again. This was not a game. This was not about credit or a contract. This was an active, ongoing federal investigation. If I stayed silent now, if I fixed the logs as Sienna wanted, I was not just an employee, I was a co-conspirator. The scanned PDF of the subpoena burned on my screen. It was no longer a choice. It was a countdown. Staying silent now. Fixing the logs, as Sienna demanded, would make me part of the cover-up. I would be the consultant who helped them defraud the SEC. My name, my work, would be the final seal on their crime. I left my Orion laptop in my bag. I shut down my personal computer. I went to a drawer and pulled out an old, clean cell phone, a burner I kept for travel. I used its data plan, tethering it to a brand new, never-used laptop I had bought with cash 2 days prior. Just in case. No Orion network, no home Wi-Fi. I searched for SEC whistleblower attorney and cross-referenced the names with former SEC enforcement staff. One name kept appearing: Jordan Fields, a reputation for being a shark, but a shark who only hunted guilty parties. I sent the email from a new, encrypted account. Consultant with original evidence of active securities fraud at a major fintech firm, need immediate, confidential consultation. He responded in 30 minutes, a link to a secure video chat. Jordan Fields looked exactly like his photo, sharp, impatient, and expensive. He did not waste time with pleasantries. "You said original evidence," he started, his voice tinny over the speaker. "Define it." "I am the architect of the compliance system, Aegis Trace. I own the IP," I said. "They are using it to facilitate and hide market manipulation. I have the system logs, the override records, and the internal emails from the CSO. Sienna Vale," Jordan's eyebrows shot up. "You own the system. You are not just an employee." "I am an external consultant. My contract gives me full administrative access for auditing purposes." "Good," he said. This was the first hint of approval. "That's very good. It means your access is legal. Here's how this works. Ms. Rivera, the SEC's whistleblower program is a specific, narrow path. You provide original, timely, and credible information that leads to a successful enforcement action. In return, the law protects you from retaliation, and if the SEC collects over $1 million, you may be entitled to a percentage of the fine." "I do not care about the money," I said. "You should," he replied flatly. "It is the only thing that proves you are a serious player. But there are rules. You cannot have hacked. You cannot have stolen data outside the scope of your job. Everything you give us must be provably, legally obtained. You are a consultant with audit rights. You can only pull audit logs. You cannot, for example, access HR files or Graham's personal calendar. Is that clear?" "Crystal clear?" "Good. Get me a copy of those logs. Get me your contract. And do not talk to anyone else." I went back to my locked office at Orion the next day. I felt like a spy. I established a secure, read-only mirror of the Aegis Trace log database, routing it to my own secure server. It was a simple diagnostic tool, perfectly within the scope of my contract. I exported the complete, immutable log file from the night of the failure. The export process itself created a new log, time-stamped, showing exactly what I had taken, and when user C. Rivera External initiated diagnostic full export, it was my receipt, my proof of legal access. As the data transferred, my desk phone rang. It was Sienna's assistant. "Ms. Val would like to meet you for a drink this evening. To clear the air." She suggested the Astor. 7 p.m. The Astor. Neutral ground. A dark, expensive hotel bar where conversations were meant to be overheard but never understood. I emailed Jordan. "She wants to meet, off-site. What do I do?" His reply was instant. "Go. Your state is a one-party consent state for recording. Download this app. Turn it on in your pocket. Do not ask leading questions. Just let her talk. Order a club soda. Stay sharp." The Astor smelled of old money and whiskey. Sienna was already there, in a corner booth, nursing a martini. She looked relaxed, friendly, the shark in friendly waters. "Claire," she smiled, "I am so glad you came. I feel like we got off on the worst possible foot." I sat down. "It has been a difficult week. For all of us," she sighed, motioning for the waiter. "But that is why we are here. You are smart. Claire, you are brilliant, actually. I mean, Aegis Trace. It's a masterpiece. That is why I was so frustrated. You are not a box checker. You are a creator." I felt the recorder in my pocket, a warm square against my leg. "What do you mean?" "I mean..." She leaned in, her voice dropping. "You do not need to be a martyr for a bunch of stupid digital data. This audit you are doing, it is making everyone nervous. It is making Graham nervous, and it is not necessary. We are all on the same team. The logs show a clear pattern of manipulation. Sienna." "The logs show noise," she hissed, her friendliness vanishing for a second. "They show a system that is too sensitive. All I did was touch the warning thresholds, just a little, to close some of the annoying alerts that were bothering our biggest clients. That is it. It is just good customer service. You understand that, don't you? Touch the warning thresholds. Close the annoying alerts." She had just admitted it. Graham is very impressed with my strategic vision, she continued, regaining her composure. He is willing to upgrade your consulting contract, make you permanent, at a new level, chief systems architect, a significant pay bump. All you have to do is be a team player, fix the log bug. That is all. We put this behind us. Everyone is happy. I will. Think about it, I said, my voice hollow. You do that, she said, sipping her drink. You are too smart to choose a pile of code over a career. I sent the audio file to Jordan as soon as I was in a cab. I went home, my mind buzzing. She was so arrogant, so sure that I was just like her, motivated by money and status. While I waited for his response, I kept digging into Vantage Meridian LLC, the shell company from the logs. The Delaware registration was a dead end, but who paid them? Not Orion. The logs showed they were receiving consulting fees from the same VIP clients they were running the wash trades for. It was a kickback scheme. The clients paid Vantage for strategic advice, and in return, Sienna, at Orion, would turn off the compliance alarms that would have flagged their illegal trades. But who was Vantage? I ran a deep social media search, cross-referencing names, scraping business networks. It took hours. And then I found it, a proud post from a young man named Mark Vale on his LinkedIn, congratulating his cousin Sienna Vale on her new role at Orion. His profile listed his current job, managing partner, Vantage Meridian LLC. My blood ran cold. It was her family. My phone rang. It was Jordan. The audio is a confession. Claire, he said, his voice alive with the thrill of the hunt. She admitted to modifying the system, but it is not enough. We need to prove why. We need to show personal gain. I have it, I said, my voice shaking. Vantage Meridian LLC, the shell company getting the kickbacks, it is owned by her cousin, Mark Vale. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Ms. Rivera, Jordan said, his voice full of a new, profound respect. You have just ended her career, a conspiracy to commit securities fraud, wire fraud, and money laundering. This is the whole package. So we send it all now, I asked. We could, Jordan said, thinking. Or, we could play this smarter. You said the SEC already sent a subpoena for Vantage. Orion has to respond to that, legally, by the end of next week. What do you think they are going to turn over? I understood instantly. They are going to turn over the fixed logs, the ones Sienna is trying to bribe me into creating. They are going to submit falsified evidence to a federal investigation. Exactly, Jordan said. So we wait. We are going to submit your whistleblower package right now. Form TCR. We will submit just enough to get you protected status and to get a formal case file opened. We will give them your contract and the first batch of logs showing the original alerts. We will let the SEC open their investigation, and then we let Sienna and Graham walk right into the trap. We let them lie to the feds, and then we give the SEC the audio recording and the family connection. We let them hang themselves with their own rope. It was brutal, it was clinical, and it was perfect. That night, I sat at my clean laptop. Jordan had emailed me the completed Form TCR, ready for submission. It was an anonymous online portal, a simple submit button standing between my old life and whatever came next. My finger hovered over the mouse. This was it, the point of no return. I thought about the humiliation in the boardroom, Graham's dismissive tone, Sienna's smug smile as I was walked out. My hand was shaking, but not from fear, from the weight of the act. This was not just about revenge anymore. Sienna was not just arrogant. She was a criminal. Graham was not just a bad boss. He was a willing accomplice. They were using my work to defraud the market. I clicked the button. The screen refreshed. Your submission has been received. I closed the laptop. My hand was steady now. My gaze was clear. This was no longer personal revenge. This was about pulling the entire rotting structure down into the light. The end came on a Tuesday. It was 10:17 in the morning. I was in my locked consultant office on the 30th floor. running a final validation on the mirrored log I had sent to Jordan. The day was aggressively normal. The market was ticking along. People were getting coffee. Then, the normal ended. It began with an email from IT, blasted to the entire company. Subject: urgent legal hold. Body: all data retention and auto-archive protocols are suspended. Effective immediately. All employees are instructed not to delete, alter, or move any electronic or physical files. This is not a drill. A collective gasp went through the building. I looked out the glass wall of my office. Down the hall, people were standing up, clustering at their desks, whispering. I saw them from my high vantage point. They were in the main lobby, walking past the massive, stupid Orion logo, 2 men and 1 woman, all wearing the same uniform, dark, ill-fitting suits that screamed government. They were not here to invest. They were here to collect. They were flanked by Dana Whitaker. She was walking stiffly, her face a pale, waxy mask. She looked like she was leading her own executioners. I watched them get into the executive elevator, the Olympus room. The office exploded into quiet panic. People were whispering about federal agents. The company-wide chat lit up, then was immediately shut down by IT. This was not a friendly inquiry. This was a raid. I knew. From a text I received from my anonymous source in legal. What was happening in the other rooms? While the SEC agents set up in the main boardroom, Graham and Sienna had scrambled into a smaller crisis room, with a handful of panicked external lawyers. Their only priority, the narrative. I could picture Sienna, pacing, her voice sharp with fear. We stick to the story. It was a bug, a systems error. The old engineer Claire, she misconfigured the thresholds. They were faulty from day one. I was not overriding anything. I was correcting a flawed system. I was just reading the results she gave me. I could see Dana, trapped, arguing. That is not going to hold. Sienna, the logs are signed. They are time-stamped. Then the logs are wrong. She's the architect. She made them faulty. And then Graham, cutting through it all, his voice like ice. Dana, we protect the company. That is the only narrative. We protect the company. Do what you have to do. They were going to make me the scapegoat. The disgruntled former employee who had set up a faulty system. It was their only play. My desk phone rang. It was Graham's executive assistant, and her voice was shaking so hard I could barely understand her. Ms. Rivera, Mr. Ellison and Ms. Whitaker request your presence in the Olympus room, now. Why? I asked, keeping my voice flat. The regulators, she whispered. They are asking for a technical briefing on Aegis Trace. They asked for you specifically. I hung up the phone. A slow, cold smile touched my lips. Of course they did. Jordan had filed my initial report. The SEC had the whistleblower's map. Now they were asking the architect to walk them through the crime scene, and Graham and Sienna, trapped by their own lies, had to invite me. They had to put me, the woman they had tried to bury, at the front of the room and hand me the microphone. I picked up my laptop and walked to the elevator. When I entered the Olympus room, the silence was suffocating. The air was thick with fear. The agents, a man named Cates, who looked tired and cynical, and a woman named Singh, who looked sharp and missed nothing, were at the head of the table. Binders open, Graham and Sienna were seated on the far side, as far from the agents as possible. They looked like defendants. Dana sat separately, her face a careful neutral mask. Ms. Rivera, Agent Singh said, not bothering with introductions. Thank you for coming. We have reviewed some preliminary information regarding the Aegis Trace system. We find it confusing. We need the architect to explain its core function, specifically, the alert thresholds and the administrative override protocols. I walked to the front, plugged my laptop into the main projector, the same projector Sienna had used to steal my work. Good morning, I said. Aegis Trace is a self-learning compliance framework. It operates on a zero-trust model. The default alert thresholds, I clicked, showing my original design, are set to be more strict than current SEC guidelines, ensuring a buffer. These defaults are locked at the kernel level. They cannot be altered without explicit, high-level administrative credentials. If I may, Sienna cut in, her voice attempting to sound helpful and collaborative, to interpret the technical jargon, what Ms. Rivera means is that the system is highly theoretical. In a live market environment, it requires significant strategic oversight to calibrate, to manage the noise. Agent Cates looked up from his pad, his gaze flat and heavy. "Excuse me, Ms. Vale," he said, his voice quiet but stopping her cold. "Let's not interpret. Ms. Rivera is the architect. Correct." Sienna's smile froze. "Yes, but I am the strategist who—" "Then let the architect speak," Kate said. "It was not a request. It was a public execution." In that one sentence, Sienna was demoted from visionary to interruption. She visibly deflated. Sinking back into her chair, the color had vanished from her face. All eyes were on her, watching her be silenced. I turned back to the screen as if nothing had happened. "The system does not generate noise," I continued, my voice clear in the quiet room. "It generates alerts. An administrator can, however, manually override a live alert, but every such action is logged, time-stamped, and signed with the user's credential. It is an immutable audit trail, by design." "And these overrides?" Agent Singh asked. "How often do they occur in a normal operating environment?" "Almost never," I said. "It would require a senior risk officer to manually verify a false positive." I clicked to the next slide. It was a timeline. "This is the Aegis trace configuration log for the past 90 days, I said. "As you can see, the thresholds are stable, unchanged for 3 years. I pointed to the timeline. Until 8 weeks ago, here, a new administrative account is created, Veil Strategy, and here, I pointed to the glowing red line. The alert threshold for wash trading is lowered by 150%. Here, the sensitivity for layering is disabled, and here, the minimum value flag for insider trading is increased by 200%. Graham was staring at the screen, his face ashen. He was seeing the raw data for the first time, and he understood. "And here," I said, "are the manual overrides, all from the past 8 weeks, all on trades related to the Vantage Meridian Fund." I flashed the log entries. Alert 945. Override S, Veil Strategy. Alert 982. Override S, Veil Strategy. Alert 1014. Override S, Veil Strategy. This is ridiculous," Sienna finally burst out, her voice high and strained. Those are test logs, I told you. The system was buggy. I was running tests." Agent Singh looked at her, her expression unreadable. "Tests," the agent repeated. "That is interesting. You seem to do a lot of testing, Ms. Vale, including in hotel bars." Sienna's entire body went rigid. I do not know what you mean." Agent Singh did not look at her. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small, black digital audio recorder. She placed it on the center of the mahogany table. "We received this recording this morning from Whistleblower Counsel," she said, her voice echoing in the deathly quiet. "It is a conversation between you and Ms. Rivera at the Astor Hotel bar 4 days ago. I believe you were discussing good customer service." She pressed play. Sienna's own voice, smooth, conspiratorial, and perfectly clear, filled the room. All I did was touch the warning thresholds, just a little, to close some of the annoying alerts that were bothering our biggest clients. That is it. It is just good customer service." Graham made a small, strangled sound. Sienna looked like she had been physically struck. Her face was a mask of pure, unadulterated shock. Her eyes flew to me, wide with the sudden, horrific understanding. She had not just been caught. She had been led into the snare. Agent Cates closed his binder. "Ms. Vale, our forensic team will be seizing your workstation. We will require a full, unredacted copy of every email, chat log, and document related to Vantage Meridian, and we will be taking a full deposition, Now. He turned to me. Ms. Rivera, we will need you to remain on site to assist our technical team. You will verify that the logs we are pulling match the original architecture. This was it. The final turn of the screw. They were asking me to be the one to confirm the evidence they were seizing. Sienna was still staring at me. The shock had burned off, replaced by a bottomless, black hatred. It was the look of a predator who had just realized it was trapped. I did not smile. I did not show any emotion at all. I just met her gaze and gave a single, polite nod, as if she had just asked me a simple, technical question. The 48 hours after the SEC arrived were a silent storm. The Olympus Room became a federal staging ground. AT techs, under the watchful eyes of Agent Singh, imaged hard drives. Lawyers huddled in hushed, panicked groups. The company was paralyzed, held in a state of suspended animation. Then came the summons, an emergency meeting of the board of directors. It was not held in the glass-walled Olympus Room. That was now a crime scene. We were convened in the auxiliary boardroom on the 20th floor, a windowless, mahogany-paneled room that felt less like a center of power and more like a bunker. The air was thick and cold. The full board was present, some in person, others patched in via secure video from London and Zurich, their faces grim and pixelated on the large screens. At the head of the table sat Leonard Marsh, the chairman. He was an old-school financier, a man who saw the world in black ink and red ink. This was an ocean of red. Beside him sat the lead partner from the external auditing firm, his face impassive. Agents Cates and Singh sat at the middle of the table, representing the UAM's government. Graham and Sienna were present, but they were no longer a unit. They sat on opposite sides of the table, flanked by their own, newly hired, separate legal counsel. They looked pale and small. And then there was me. I was not seated with the management team. Leonard Marsh's assistant had directed me to a chair at the main table, next to the auditors. My nameplate, hastily printed, read, Claire Rivera, independent expert, IP owner, Aegis Trace. Leonard Marsh began, his voice a low rumble. He did not bother with pleasantries. I have read the preliminary findings from the SEC. I have read the auditor's alert. I have read Ms. Rivera's contract, he said, tapping a thick binder. The board is not here to discuss quarterly earnings. We are here to understand one thing. He fixed his gaze on Graham, then Sienna. Is this company the victim of a catastrophic, unforeseen systems error, or was this a deliberate, intentional act of fraud? The silence was absolute. Sienna's lawyer whispered in her ear. She sat up, grasping at the last vestiges of her authority. Leonard, members of the board, she began, her voice straining for that old polished confidence. What you are seeing is the friction of innovation. We are under immense, unprecedented pressure to drive growth, Aegis Trace, while a brilliant piece of engineering, she glanced at me, is an aggressive AI. It was generating thousands of false positives, constant misclassifications. She was talking fast, trying to weave a new narrative. My team was operating in a test mode environment to calibrate the noise, to find the signal, what Ms. Rivera has presented as overrides. That is simply a case of test data getting mixed with the production logs. It is a technical error, a complex one, I admit, but it is a systems issue, not a strategy issue. It was a good lie, plausible, technical. It blamed the machine. Ms. Rivera, Leonard said, turning to me. Is that plausible? I looked at the board. I looked at the agents. No, I said, my voice clear in the dead air. It is not. I motioned to the IT tech in the corner. Please put my workstation display on the main screen. The 60-inch monitor at the end of the room lit up. I did not just show the logs. I showed a cross-reference timeline. Ms. Vale is correct that the system is complex, I said. But it is not buggy. On the left, you will see the Aegis Trace override log. On the right, the executive email server archive. I used my mouse, and the entire room followed the red laser dot. At 1:17 in the morning on August 14th, the account S. Veil strategy manually overrode Alert 881B, a clear wash trade flag related to the Vantage Meridian Fund. I moved the dot to the right side of the screen. At 1:19 a.m., 2 minutes later, an email was sent from Sienna Vale to Graham Ellison. The subject line was handled. The body read, "That noisy alert is fixed. The VIP client is clear for the morning trade." A board member from London muttered an expletive. I continued. September 5th, 2:32 in the morning, Alert 945D, a high-volume layering pattern, override by S. Veil strategy. I moved the dot again. 2:33 a.m., email from Ms. Vale to Mr. Ellison. Another one, taken care of. I put up the last one. September 28th, 3:07 a.m., a cluster of 12 alerts related to Vantage, all overridden by Veil strategy, and this email, sent 1 minute later, at 3:08 a.m. I read it aloud. "Alerts quiet now. Our VIP won't have issues tomorrow. We are going to make the quarter." I turned off the laser. This is not test mode bleed. This is not AI misclassification. This is a documented, real-time criminal conspiracy to suppress federal compliance alerts, which was then immediately reported to the CEO. The room was frozen. Graham Ellison looked like he was choking. Agent Cates leaned forward, his voice casual. "Mr. Ellison, you received these emails. You knew Ms. Vale was quieting alerts. Were you aware that she was doing this by manually disabling the core functions of your firm's only compliance system?" Graham's lawyer put a hand on his arm, but Graham ignored it. He was sputtering. I am not a technologist. I trusted my chief strategy officer. Her numbers. The growth. I trusted her to manage the details. I focused on the results, on the strategy." He was trying to paint himself as an ignorant leader, duped by a subordinate. Before anyone could accept that, I spoke again. "He did not just trust her," I said. My voice was shaking, not with fear, but with a cold, precise anger. "He enabled her, and he silenced me." All eyes, including Graham's, snapped to me. "I am the architect of Aegis Trace," I said, speaking directly to Leonard Marsh. "I built it from scratch. 11 years of my life. At a company-wide strategy meeting 3 weeks ago, Graham Ellison and Sienna Vale stood on a stage and presented my entire system, my work, as the Sienna Initiative. They stole my credit, in front of everyone." I looked at Graham. When I confronted him privately, when I reminded him that I owned the IP and that what they were doing was wrong, he threatened me. He told me I was complicating things. He told me not to make myself an HR problem. I turned back to the board. This was not a mistake. This was a pattern. He wanted the numbers, and she wanted the credit. And to get what they both wanted, they had to break the system. They had to silence the person who built it. This is not a failure of compliance. This is a failure of leadership, and a failure of character, from the very top. Leonard Marsh stared at Graham. The full, ugly picture was now clear the affair. The stolen glory, the fraud, the threats. The CEO had not been duped. He had been a willing partner, protecting his lover while she poisoned the company. Agent Singh spoke into the profound silence. "Mr. Marsh," she said, her voice clinical. "The SEC sees 2 paths forward, and you will choose one, today. Path 1, she said, is cooperation. You publicly acknowledge the misconduct. You conduct an immediate and total house cleaning, which includes the termination of any and all individuals involved in this scheme. You will pay a fine that will be significant. You will hire an independent monitor, chosen by us, for no less than 3 years. You will survive. But you will be scarred." She paused, letting the weight settle. "Path 2, she continued, is you fight us. You adopt Ms. Vale's test mode narrative. You claim this was a technical error. We will then proceed with a formal complaint charging Orion Ledger Works and its executive officers personally, with institutional misconduct, conspiracy to commit securities fraud, and obstruction of justice. The fines will be punitive, and we will move to have your broker-dealer license permanently revoked. She looked at each board member. Choose. This was it. The entire game. Focused on a single point. All eyes in the room, the board, the auditors, the lawyers. The agents turned to Graham Ellison. He was the CEO. He was the one who had received the emails. He had to be the one to either confirm the lie or admit the truth. Sienna was staring at him. Her face was a mask of pure terror. Her bravado was gone. She was pleading with her eyes. Protect me. Fight for me. Choose me. Her entire life, her career, her reputation, all of it rested on this man, the man she had done this for. Graham did not look at her. His gaze was locked. He was staring across the table, his eyes fixed on me. He was not looking at his lover. He was not looking at his C-suite star. He was looking at the scapegoat, the technical minutia, the woman he had slandered in this very room. In my gaze, he found no mercy. He found no anger. He just found the absolute, unyielding truth. He saw the end of his road. He broke eye contact first. He looked down at his hands, clasped on the polished table. A small, strangled sound escaped his throat. He cleared it. He sat up, and when he spoke, his voice was a dead, hollow whisper. "We will cooperate." He said it again, louder, for the federal agents, for the board, for the record. Orion Ledgerworks will cooperate fully, Ms. Vale. Ms. Vale acted outside the scope of her authority. I, had no knowledge of her specific actions. A sharp, broken gasp cut through the room. It was Sienna. She looked at Graham, her expression shattering from terror into a look of such profound, devastating betrayal that it was almost hard to watch. He had made his choice. He had chosen the company. He had chosen himself. And in doing so, he had just confirmed her guilt and thrown her to the wolves. She was alone. Graham's betrayal hung in the air, thick and toxic. The board meeting had been an execution. This was the autopsy. We were no longer in an Orion boardroom. The battle had moved to a neutral, sterile conference room at the SEC's downtown offices, a soulless space of gray carpet and fluorescent lighting. The mood was not one of negotiation. It was one of terms of surrender. Agent Cates and Agent Singh were present, but they were silent observers. The man running the meeting was an SEC enforcement lawyer named Aronson, a man with a face like carved granite and eyes that looked like they had seen every lie in the book. Leonard Marsh and Dana Whitaker were there for Orion, their faces grim. My lawyer, Jordan Fields, sat beside me, his briefcase open. And then there was Sienna. She was flanked by a new, expensive-looking lawyer, a man named Pitt, who specialized in fighting the government. She was no longer the composed executive. She was a defendant. "Let us be clear about what this is," Aronson began, his voice flat. "This is a settlement discussion based on the evidence collected. Orion Ledgerworks faces a fine in the $50 million range, a complete restructuring of its compliance division, and the installation of an independent monitor for 3 years. He then turned his gaze to Sienna. For Ms. Vale, the enforcement division is seeking a permanent industry bar for willful and fraudulent manipulation of compliance systems, obstruction, and conspiracy. My client rejects those characterizations entirely, Pitt cut in, his voice smooth and practiced. He was the only one in the room who seemed relaxed. "We believe," Pitt continued, "that the SEC's entire case is built on compromised evidence provided by a single, compromised witness." He gestured, not at me, but toward me, as if I were a piece of evidence. "Ms. Rivera, a witness who, by her own admission, operates under a highly unusual and irregular licensing structure, a structure that gives her, and her alone, singular, unchecked, and autonomous control over the Aegis trace system." I felt my blood run cold. "Ms. Rivera was fired," Pitt said, building his narrative. "She had motive. She had unchecked access. How do we know she did not alter these logs after she was terminated? How do we know this is not a sophisticated act of revenge, framing Ms. Vale to cover her own system's failures? Sienna watched me, a small, tight smile playing on her lips. This was her play. Blame the architect. That is a baseless allegation, Jordan said, his voice sharp. Is it? Pitt countered. He pulled a sheaf of papers from a folder. Because we have evidence that Ms. Rivera herself proposed weakening these very compliance thresholds. She has the same motive as my client, only she had the means. He passed the documents to Aronson, who read them without expression. Pitt turned to the room. This is an email, he said. From Claire Rivera to the head of sales, dated January of this year, regarding a new client who was complaining about compliance flags. He read from the page. I quote, "If this friction continues, we should consider tweaking the thresholds. We need to find a way to make the client happy." Leonard Marsh's head snapped toward me. Dana Whitaker's eyes widened. Sienna's smile grew. She thought she had me. She was painting me as a co-conspirator, a dirty witness, voiding my entire testimony. She was trying to create reasonable doubt. I leaned forward, my voice perfectly calm. "Mr. Aronson, may I see that document?" Aronson slid the paper across the table. I looked at it. It was exactly what I expected. "Mr. Pitt is a very good lawyer," I said, my voice cutting through the silence. "He is excellent at selective editing." I opened my laptop, the one I had brought specifically for this. What Mr. Pitt has provided is a single, cut-down sentence from a much longer email thread. I have the full, archived thread on my server. I am projecting it now. The blank wall lit up. There it was, the original request from the sales manager. Panicked. "Claire, our new guy is furious. Your system is blocking his trades. You need to turn it off." And then, my reply. I read the part Sienna's lawyer had used. "If this friction continues, we should consider tweaking the thresholds. We need to find a way to make the client happy." Then, I read the rest of the sentence he had cut off. But happy does not mean non-compliant. Any such tweak cannot, under any circumstances, drop our sensitivity below the SEC's minimum required framework. The alerts are firing because the client is trading suspiciously. My recommendation is that you educate the client on our regulatory duties, not find ways to circumvent them. Silencing the system, as you suggest, would be a direct violation. The alerts stand. The room was silent. I pointed to the timestamp. I sent that email on January 10th. Sienna Vale was copied on it. She read my analysis, understood it, and 3 months later, went in at 2 a.m. and did the very thing I had explicitly warned the company was illegal. Sienna's smile was gone. "This is not evidence of my guilt, Mr. Pitt," I said. My eyes locked on his. "This is evidence of your client's intent. She knew the rules, she knew my position, and she cut this email thread apart for the same reason she overrode the logs to manipulate the truth." Pitt's face was hardening. His easy confidence was gone. "A compelling narrative," Aronson said, his voice dry. "But it still requires a motive. If I may," Jordan Fields spoke up for the first time. His voice was quiet, but it commanded the room. He placed a thin file on the table. "We can stop talking about test modes and making clients happy. We have the motive. It is, as it usually is, very simple." He passed copies to Aronson and Leonard. "These," he said, "are the bank records for Vantage Meridian LLC, the entity receiving consulting fees from the VIP clients Ms. Vale was protecting." He tapped the first page. "And these are the wire transfers from those clients to Vantage. On August 14th, a transfer of $50,000. Hours later, as Ms. Rivera's logs show, Ms. Vale overrode that client's wash trade alert." He turned the page. "On September 5th, a transfer of $70,000. That same night, Ms. Vale disabled the layering alerts for that client." He let the facts sink in. We have a direct, one-to-one correlation between kickback payments and compliance overrides, Jordan said. And who is Vantage Meridian LLC? Aronson asked, though his face showed he already knew. It is a Delaware shell company, Jordan said. Registered 6 months ago, the sole managing partner is a Mr. Mark Vail. He paused, then delivered the final, fatal blow. Sienna Vail's first cousin, a low sound, half groan, half gasp, came from Dana Whitaker. Leonard Marsh closed his eyes. It was over. The kickback scheme, the family connection, the audio confession, the log data, the doctored emails. It was a complete, airtight case. Sienna was hyperventilating. She looked wildly around the room, her eyes landing on Graham, who had been ordered to attend but to remain silent. "Graham!" she shrieked, her voice cracking. "Tell them you cannot let them do this. You knew you told me to be aggressive." Graham stared at the table, his face the color of old paper. "Tell them, Graham," she was sobbing now. "We had an exchange. This was not just work. You promised me. You cannot just sit there while they destroy me." She was trying to pull him down with her, to blow up the last vestiges of his reputation with the affair. Aronson, the SEC lawyer, did not even blink. "Ms. Vail," he said, his voice bored. "Your personal relationship with Mr. Ellison is of no interest to the Commission, unless you are prepared to testify, under oath, that he was a knowing participant in the financial kickback scheme." Sienna's mouth opened, then closed. She had nothing, no email, no log, just the words of a lover who had already betrayed her. She had been careful to hide the money from him, to present him only with the results, and in doing so, she had given him the very deniability he was now using to save himself. Leonard Marsh, seeing his opening to finally cauterize the wound, spoke. "Mr. Aronson," he said, his voice firm. "Orion Ledger, Works accepts all terms. The fine will be paid, the reforms will be implemented, and we will, of course, terminate the employment of any individual, identified as the center of this scheme. We will cooperate fully." He had officially, publicly, thrown her overboard. Aronson nodded slowly. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a single, thick document, bound in blue. He slid it across the table. It stopped directly in front of Sienna and her trembling lawyer. "This," Aronson said, "is the order instituting proceedings. It is the formal charging document. It lays out the facts as we have just discussed them. It details the conspiracy, the fraud, the obstruction, and the money laundering. It names you, Ms. Vail, personally." He placed his pen on top of the cover. "It is not signed," he said. "The Commission is prepared to file this today. We will win. The permanent bar will be the least of your worries, as this file, and all its evidence, will be immediately transferred to the Department of Justice for criminal prosecution." Sienna looked at the document as if it were a bomb. "Or," Aronson continued, "you have one other option. You cooperate, you sign a full confession, acknowledging the facts as laid out. You provide a complete disgorgement of all funds. In exchange, the Commission will note your cooperation. It will not stop the bar, but it will be taken into consideration when the U.S. Attorney's Office reviews your file." He stood up. "It is the only choice you have left. You have until the end of the day to decide." Sienna did not move. She just stared at the blue-bound document, the legal tombstone of her entire life, placed on the table by a man who did not care about her ambition, her strategy, or her excuses. Sienna chose to sign. It was not a choice, really. It was an inevitability. The final meeting was a formality, a reading of the charges she had already agreed to. She sat in the same gray SEC conference room, but this time she was flanked only by her lawyer. She looked hollow. The fire was gone. Aronson, the enforcement lawyer, did not look at her. He looked at the large screen at the end of the room as he presented the final synthesized case. "Let the record show," Aronson said, his voice a flat monotone. That the respondent, Sienna Vale, has stipulated to the following facts. He clicked a remote. The screen lit up. First, a flowchart. It showed the VIP clients, the arrows of their consulting fees flowing into Vantage Meridian LLC, and the corresponding arrows flowing out to Mark Vale. He clicked again. A timeline. On the top axis, the dates of the payments to Vantage. On the bottom axis, the corresponding timestamps of the Aegis Trace overrides. All signed S. Vale strategy. The correlation was perfect. A one-to-one match of crime and cover-up. He clicked again, the audio waveform from the Astor bar. He played the clip one last time. All I did was touch the warning thresholds, close some of the annoying alerts. He clicked a final time, a side-by-side comparison of the email thread Sienna's lawyer had tried to use, next to the full, complete thread. The bright red highlighting of the text, she had deliberately cut out the part where I explicitly stated that silencing the system was illegal, was damning. Based on this undisputed evidence, Aronson said, the Commission finds a pattern of willful deception, conspiracy, and fraud. He closed the binder. He read the verdict. Pursuant to the settlement, Sienna Vale is hereby permanently barred from association with any broker, dealer, investment advisor, or securities firm. A civil penalty of $750,000 is imposed. Furthermore, this order will be made public, in full, in an SEC press release this afternoon. He did not look at her. We are concluded. A permanent bar. It was the Wall Street death sentence, not jail. Perhaps her cooperation had saved her from that, but her life, the one she valued, the one of high-stakes strategy and penthouse meetings, was over. She was a non-person. Back at Orion. The fallout was swift but quiet. Graham Ellison's resignation was announced in a bland internal memo, citing a desire to pursue other opportunities and spend time with his family. The board had given him a quiet exit in exchange for his cooperation. Leonard Marsh took over as interim CEO. The entire Chief Strategy Officer division was dissolved. The risk department was gutted and placed under the direct control of Dana Whitaker, who had survived. I was in my final week as a consultant, preparing the handoff documentation. Leonard Marsh himself requested a meeting, just me and him, in his massive corner office. "Claire," he said, gesturing to a seat. He looked tired, but the crisis had passed. "I want to apologize, officially, on behalf of this board. What was done to you, regarding the credit for your work, was inexcusable. It was a failure of leadership, and I am sorry." "Thank you, Leonard," I said. "This company is undertaking a radical restructuring," he continued. "We need to rebuild trust, not just with the SEC, but with ourselves. We need a new center of gravity. We need integrity." He slid a contract proposal across the desk. "The board has unanimously approved this offer. We are creating a new position, Chief Risk and Integrity Officer. It reports directly to me and to the board, full autonomy, total control over Aegis Trace. Of course, we want you to be that person. We want you to stay and lead us." The offer was staggering. The salary was astronomical. The power was absolute. It was everything I should have wanted. It was validation. I looked at the contract. I thought about the last 11 years. I thought about sitting in rooms like this, arguing with men like him, trying to get them to listen. I slid the contract back across the desk. "No, thank you, Leonard," I said, my voice gentle. He was stunned. "Claire, I do not think you understand. This is—" "I understand completely," I said, "and I am grateful, but I have spent more than a decade of my life building walls to protect a company from its own leadership. I built a system to protect Orion from people who thought they were above the rules." I stood up. "This time," I said, "I want to go build something that I do not have to protect from its own owners." I walked out of the Orion LedgerWorks lobby for the last time. My consulting contract was fulfilled. The system was stable. The criminals had been purged. My work was done. I stepped out onto the sidewalk, into the bright, cold afternoon of the financial district. I blended into the crowd. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. It was a push notification from a financial newswire. SEC press release. Sienna Vale, formerly Chief Strategy Officer at Orion Ledger Works, has been barred from the securities industry for fraudulent conduct and manipulation of compliance systems. I read the line. I read it again. Barred from the securities industry. It was not a rumor. It was not an internal memo. It was a public, permanent, searchable record of her disgrace. A small, very small, smile touched my lips. It was not a feeling of joy. It was not loud or triumphant. It was the quiet, clean feeling of a complex equation being solved, of a balance sheet finally being reconciled. Sienna had stolen my work on a public stage to gain fame. Now, she had lost her entire career on a public stage as the price. The justice was cold, but it was perfect. My other phone, my personal one, buzzed in my bag. I pulled it out. The screen was lighting up with new emails to my Rivera Forensic Systems account. A small venture capital fund, a crypto startup, a boutique hedge fund. Heard you are back on the market. Interested in discussing a new architecture. Looking for a new head of risk. I looked at the messages. All these new opportunities. All these people wanting a piece of the architect who had taken down Orion. I silenced the screen. I did not reply to any of them. I slipped the phone into my pocket and just kept walking. Merging with the anonymous river of people. I did not know where I was going next. For the first time in 11 years, I did not have a plan. For the first time, I was the only one writing the rules. They thought power was getting the SEC to look away. I know real power is knowing when to make the SEC look closer. Thank you so much for listening to my story. Where in the world are you listening from? Let's connect and share our thoughts in the comments below. Please subscribe to Boss Revenge Stories, like this video, and give us some extra support by hitting the hype button so more people can hear this story.